Thank you all for joining today. You're at PDW number 11. This is Proposal Development Workshops. This one is a new one for this cycle. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, the Proposal Workshop series starts in the fall and runs through the spring. This one, so we've gone through how to create your proposal, and now we're at these kind of next level topics. And so this one's about working with the ASU Foundation, and we're very pleased to host Andrew Nelson and Suzanne Rinker today, who will both introduce themselves and the topic and spend some time with you working through the intricacies of the ASU Foundation. Take it away, Andrew and Suzanne.
Great, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen just for a second so you can actually see us without being distracted by the slides. Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Nelson. I'm the Senior Director for Foundation Development here at the ASU Foundation. Looking forward to our conversation today about how to work with the ASU Foundation to secure philanthropic funding. I'll also turn it over to my colleague who is on my screen left, Suzanne, to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Rinker, Vice President of Enterprise Development at the ASU Foundation. So work very closely kind of across the enterprises to help with philanthropic funding, also oversee corporate philanthropy. We're not going to go into that as much today as the foundation piece, but always open to have that conversation.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. It is a little bit difficult to manage and monitor chat while in presentation mode. So if there are questions or things that others are seeing, feel free to jump in or shout them out during. Otherwise, I might not see them until the end. So yes, let's jump.
And Andrew, I'll keep an eye out for that as well.
Amazing. Perfect. Well, yes, as Faye said, welcome to PDW 11, working with the ASU Foundation. We have, let's see if my click works here. There we go. We have the following agenda. We're going to start with objectives, do quick introductions, a little bit more than we just gave, overview of the ASU Foundation, going into understanding like the philanthropic funding landscape. And then the last part, the last two sections really are navigating philanthropic grant making, the role of the ASU Foundation, and how we can work together to secure philanthropic funding. And then hopefully have a good amount of time left at the end for any Q&A that anybody has. And so let's jump into it with our objectives. So we have three main objectives for our time together today, basically going into the structure and organization of the ASU Foundation, how it's optimized and set up for your success, key elements of philanthropic funding, and then also the ways in which the ASU Foundation can support you in your pursuit of identification of and solicitation of foundation support. So as we just mentioned, these are your presenters today. Suzanne Rinker, Vice President for Enterprise Development on the left. I'm Andrew Nelson, Senior Director for Foundation Development on the right. I started at the ASU Foundation actually back in November. And though I'm new to the ASU Foundation, I'm not new to the institution. I'm a two-time Sun Devil with both my master's and doctorate from the Teachers College here at ASU. I also worked on the ASU side, not the ASU Foundation, but the ASU side, first in the Office of University Initiatives starting in 2017, and then in the Office of Applied Innovation in 2020. And so I've been part of the ASU family one way or another for quite a while now. I've also taught a couple of classes through Watts College and through University College. Suzanne, anything else you'd like to share about yourself while we're here?
No, just brief background. I've been with the ASU Foundation for about 6.5 years. I have done a myriad of roles at the ASU Foundation. I was with WP Carey leading the fundraising team there when I first came to ASU. I've overseen centrally unit development, so I'm very familiar with the academic units in schools. And now I've moved into this enterprise development role, thinking, again, across the enterprises, a little bit more boundary spanning. And so I definitely have a good lens of all of the different areas at ASU.
Wonderful. Then without any further ado, we will hop right into it. So we wanted to start off by really orienting and situating this context in where ASU Foundation, did I go into, okay, where the ASU Foundation is in the broader ASU public enterprise. And so this is maybe a diagram or a graphic that you've seen in the past that shows, part of our complex organizational structure. Where we've got the three main enterprises of the university: the academic enterprise, knowledge enterprise, and learning enterprise. And then part of the broader ASU public enterprise, we have things like Ed Plus, Enterprise Partners, ET, which is Enterprise Technology, and you can see the others on there. And so in that bottom section of 5 bars, ASU Enterprise Partners is where the ASU Foundation sits, and we'll go into that here in just a second. The Enterprise Partners organizational model allows us to work in service of ASU in ways that the university otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So, for example, we have the ASU Foundation, which is responsible for fundraising. You might be familiar with Realm Spark, which is a kind of an ed tech accelerator that's part of the Enterprise Partners, University Realty, SkySong Innovations. All of these are part of the ASU Enterprise family. And really, it's all to generate, different types of resources for the university. We work on behalf of and in service of the university. So jumping into the ASU Foundation, which is one of I think you saw the 7 different parts of the ASU Enterprise Partners. You can see our mission over there on the right-hand side, but really what this means is that the ASU Foundation basically facilitates and receives all contributions to ASU from individuals, corporations, foundations, and other private sources. It also means that we coordinate and direct major fundraising campaigns on behalf of ASU. Excuse me. So if, depending on how long you guys have been here, you might be familiar with Campaign 2020, which was a several-year-long campaign for fundraising. We oversee development efforts for the different units. We disperse contributions according to the express wishes of the donor, oversee management of investment and endowment assets, and actively promote a culture of philanthropy and generosity, at ASU. And so I like this because I think it neatly summarizes in 4 little phrases, what we see our role as. We serve. So we serve the faculty and staff of ASU to help bring them resources. We engage with our donors, philanthropists, investors, the local community, connecting them to ASU and helping them find ways to make an impact through the university. We innovate, just like ASU is the most innovative university in the country. ASU Foundation tries to embody that same mindset and those same principles. And so we're always looking out for new ideas, new solutions, new approaches, and new ways to address some of the challenges facing ASU. And then the last one is we serve. So it shows that excuse me, and we care, this is the last one. And so we want, faculty, staff, students, the community to know that we are here as a resource for them, in service of them, on their behalf. And so we serve, we engage, we innovate, and we care. These are the things that we do here at the ASU Foundation. And so I'm going to pause here for just a second and turn it over to Suzanne, who can explain a little bit more about the kind of the 3-tiered structure of the ASU Foundation and how this all fits into our development efforts.
Yeah, I think this is a good graphic to really show, many of you are embedded into academic units and so have development officers that you may work with or you may know of that serve your unit. And so that top part of the triangle really shows that we do hire frontline development officers that serve the academic colleges and schools, that serve many of the non-academic units. For example, I have a senior director of development who's embedded in the Biodesign Institute or the McCain Institute. And then some that are serving university initiatives. I have someone who fundraises and is focusing on things like veteran support, the LIFT initiative, the HSI designation. So that's really kind of our frontline out in the areas development team members. And then centrally at the ASU Foundation, we have different teams that really work to support the frontline foundation development officers, as well as all of you. So donor relations, estate planning, corporate philanthropy, as I mentioned, that's something that rolls up to me. Foundation development, the team that Andrew is a part of, writing services, so a team that really focuses solely on philanthropic proposal writing and writing things like case statements and in cases for support for different projects, then annual giving and research and prospect management. And that again, all is encompassed under Enterprise Partners. We have our supporting operations that really help support all of the work that we're doing. So I show this to everyone to really show that even, you may be in a unit and again, interfacing with one development officer, but I hope this shows that it really is a part of a much larger team. And there is a lot of central support, both for any of our unit development officers or for, faculty who, have an idea or a project that they want to move forward, that they want to do centrally with our development staff.
Great, thank you. And so as you see on the left-hand side of that triangle, the foundation development is highlighted in red. I did that because I'm on the foundation development team. I have a colleague, Jenny Bickford, who is also on the foundation development team along with me. And then the leader of the foundation development team is Jacqueline Smith, who you may have encountered. She's been with the university or with the ASU Foundation for quite a while now. And so we report up to her and we make up the current foundation development team. And so we are here as really a resource for anything philanthropic funding, foundation funding that we're going to be talking about today. So we'll continue on. So we're going to move now away from about the ASU Foundation and our structure and the way we're set up for support and starting to go into the philanthropic landscape, understanding philanthropic foundations. And so starting off with just a quick just a quick summary of giving in the United States by source. And so you see here that in 2021, more than $485 billion was given to charity. And the breakdown by individuals, foundations, bequests, and corporations over on the right-hand side. And you can see that broadly speaking, individuals make up the largest source of philanthropic giving in the United States and have for many years. Continuing on, so next is giving by destination. So all that money that we were looking at on the previous slide, that 485 billion, where is that going? To what causes? To what kind of categories of areas? And so you see that religion makes up like the largest percentage of philanthropic gifts, or the destination of the largest percentage of philanthropic gifts, followed by education, going into human services, and so on down the line. On the left-hand side, you can just see a couple of insights about giving by destination. So donor advised funds, or DAFs, you might have seen those, are becoming a very popular source of giving. And these numbers might be a little bit, I don't want to say skewed, but they might be a little bit of an aberration compared to historical trends, just based on the pandemic and how that changed people's giving habits and giving destinations. And so, these probably have persisted for the last couple of years, but prior to 2019, those numbers might have shifted slightly. So next, we're going to go into the ASU Foundation and our donor types. And so you can see here, this is just based on donor counts, not dollar amounts. So it's again skewed a little bit by just to reflect the different institutions or individuals who are giving. And so you can see that individuals are the largest percentage of ASU Foundation's donor types and records. And you can see the breakdown by other major categories there. So like corporations, for example, make up less than 1.5%. Foundations, very, very, very small percentage overall. I believe the numbers, it's like 20, in this particular one, it's like 22,000 alumni, 62,000 other individuals, and 294 foundations, which is a relative to the larger pie, a small number. But if we look at the actual amounts given by each different donor type, we can see that breakdown here. So individuals, and this is, I believe, Suzanne, current as of yesterday.
Yes, yeah, as of yesterday.
Great. So you can see the actual breakdown of where money given to ASU and ASU Foundation is coming from. And so even though foundations are a relatively small number of the donor types that we have here at the ASU Foundation, you can see that they make up a disproportionately large amount of the actual gifts received by the university. I just added those percentages on there for comparison to the next slide. And so you can see, individuals just under 40%, foundations just under 25%. And those, generally speaking, mirror trends that we see nationally. So this is on the national side of the, almost $50 billion given to education. Here's the primary sources, where alumni are about 22%, foundations 33%, and so on around the rest of the circle. And so the trends that we see here at the ASU Foundation are generally mirrored in national data as well. Okay, so continuing on about with foundations. So there are 4 main types of institutional funders. The first main type are independent foundations. These often have narrowly defined philanthropic goals and interests while supporting a variety of issues through what they try to do as an objective process. And so some examples are, I've included ones that you might be familiar with, right? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the largest foundations in the world, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and then it's a big one locally, but operating on a different scale than the first 2 examples is the Dorrance Family Foundation. They've been a major supporter of initiatives here at ASU. And so these, yeah, as you can see there, these when we think of foundations, these are often what come to mind for us, are these independent or private foundations. This includes family foundations, which can be a little bit more opaque. You know, maybe they don't have a website, they have limited information on their grant making, and also often give in restricted fashion. The next type of institutional funder, as you heard Suzanne mention at the beginning, this is something that rolls up to her, is our corporate giving. And so, you know, this might include things like the Walmart Foundation, Google.org, APS Foundation. These are companies, these are corporations that are giving through their philanthropic or charitable arms. Oftentimes, you know, motivations for this are, yes, to support their local community, where they live and work and where their employees live and work. It's part of their corporate social responsibility. But it also serves a different purpose for them, which is, you know, things like recruitment opportunities, branding, visibility within their community, and emphasis in the places that they work. The third type of institutional funder that we have are operating foundations. And so these often run programs and facilities themselves with less focus on grant making. So, you know, like the J. Paul Getty Trust operates the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. You know, different museums, different zoos, different cultural institutions will often have a foundation, but that's not so that they can make grants to community organizations, but so that they can raise funds to run the facilities, to run their operations themselves, hence operating institutional funders. And then the last are public charities, which often have specific geographic regions, like community foundations. You might be familiar with the Arizona Community Foundation, or they have a specific population or issue area that they work, like the American Lung Association. Each of these 4 are different types of institutional funders, but for our time today, we're going to be focused largely on the independent private foundations. Again, the ones that most of us, or many of us, think of when we think of foundations. And so I think it's also important to ground this conversation in why institutional funders give and the reason for institutional funders that we saw on that previous slide, why they do make gifts. And I want to contrast this with reasons why individuals give. So organizational funders, as we mentioned a moment ago, are often mission driven. They have identified focus areas. So we'll go into those in just a little bit. They often have highly detailed funding and grant making guidelines. So, you know, we're looking for funds or looking for grantees that meet certain criteria, that will work in certain ways or work in certain areas. And they have developed goals and strategies for achieving broad impact. So for institutional funders, they have a lot of vision in terms of how they want their funds to be spent for particular purposes. They're also usually looking to fund measurable opportunities. So it's going to be important that we think about how we measure the impact and demonstrate the success of our work. And another criteria that they often are looking for are things that have the potential and ability to be scaled. This is not a hard and fast rule that they want things that can be scaled, but generally speaking, they want things that can be scaled regionally, nationally, or globally, depending on the foundation and their goals. And to contrast this with some of the reasons why individuals give, right, so the ASU Foundation also has quite a few staff who work in the individual space, and you know, when you talk to them, it's all about feeling connected to an institution, to meet critical and basic needs, to give back to an organization or to people that they care about, to make the community or the world or the place that they live a better place, to change someone's life, to be emotionally moved by stories, or to bring about a desired impact or result. Oftentimes, I think a good way to compare them is that, you know, institutional funders are much more disciplined in their, and I don't mean that in like a good or bad way, but just they're more focused and they have clearer parameters that they follow when making gifts. And so I want to share just a couple of beliefs about institutional donors, thinking again specifically about generally the independent and private foundations, but also to a certain extent corporate foundations as well. And there are a couple of misconceptions that I think are important to share. The first is that funding is easy to get. And so, you know, oftentimes a faculty or staff might say, well, can't we go after such and such a foundation? They've got a lot of money that they need to give away. And it's like, yes, we can, but I'll get to the reality here in just a second. Another kind of misconception is that institutional donors, institutional givers, that their focus is ASU and our unit priorities or our institutional priorities. Another misconception is that funders are likely to provide operating support or long-term sustained continued funding or endowment funding, and that these institutional donors are the source of frequent transformational gifts. So the reality behind these things is that foundation and corporate funding is actually highly competitive. Oftentimes, if there's an RFP put out where, you know, a process by which they're soliciting ideas, they'll get, depending on the dollar amount, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, if not more, ideas that they then have to sift through, identify which are the best fit for their mission and goals. And so it's a very highly competitive process. So that their next thing is that their focus is not on ASU and our institution and our institutional goals and mission and priorities. They have their own goals. And so for this reason, we have to be donor centric and really think about how are the things that we are putting in front of foundations and donors, how is that framed and how will it resonate with them? Generally speaking, and this is an important one, is, you know, foundations, there are some that will give general operating support, but really they tend to want discrete programs, almost like a baked good. Like, here's something we are selling. This particular project, which is very discrete, we can understand it, you can put it in a box, we can talk about the impact, the outcomes, how we can measure the success of it. They want these sorts of programs that they can put their money behind because it's very narrow and specific, and we can align it to what they are focused on. And then the last thing I'll say on this is the idea of transformational gifts. We have a whole unit here at the ASU Foundation called the Moonshot Accelerator, led by our colleague Michelle Govani. And so what she does is helps ASU teams build capacity for go after, solicit, and hopefully win some major gifts at the 10 million mark or above. And so a couple that come to mind are the MacArthur 100 million and change, where they give away, you know, I think they do this every other year, but where they are looking for a single grantee that they can give $100 million to in a very transformational way. But then there are other ones that you might be familiar with, like X Prize and Lever for Change are a couple. And so if you think you have a gift, an idea or a concept or an approach that is at that level, we'd be happy to put you in touch with our colleague Michelle and her team. They run programs throughout the year where they are helping teams with their theory of change, helping them figure out, you know, what is their measurement and evaluation policy? How are the ways approach? How are the ways in which they center equity in their work? Because these are common themes between these large 8-figure and above gifts. All right, so now we're going to move into navigating philanthropic foundations and talking about the role of the ASU Foundation and the role of the foundation development team, namely myself, my colleague Jenny, and our colleague Jacqueline. And so embedded into this kind of next section of our presentation, we're going to be talking about like ways that we can work with you, ways that we can support you, but also the things that we're going to be that I'll talk about are give you maybe a little bit of insight into the work that we do, so that if and when you want to do some of this on your own or want to do some background searching, you'll have some good information as you go about that. So our role on the foundation development team is, so me and Jenny and Jacqueline each have a portfolio of national level foundations that we work with and maintain relationships. So just as a couple of examples, like I have the Rockefeller Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Schmidt Futures, and then, I tag team on Gates Foundation and Schultz Family Foundation and Packard. And so we have these top level national foundations that are in our portfolio that we try to kind of advance a relationship on behalf of ASU with. The next thing is we also have a number of other mechanisms through which we are identifying institutional funding opportunities that we then share with people and teams that are relevant within the institution and across units. And so, for example, I might find one and I'll reach out to a colleague and say, hey, do you know anyone working in regenerative agriculture? And they'll say, yeah, you should send it to this person. And so we kind of use word of mouth. We use web searches, web presence to identify who the right people to share these ideas with are, and then supporting them as they go after the funding. We work with the institution and with units to develop strategies and investable concepts for institutional funders. And so, my background, I mentioned this a little bit, but have been with the institution for 5 years on the project side, where I was designing, developing, building new projects, or helping to figure out how to scale them. And so I have a good amount of background expertise in the actual execution of projects. And prior to that was in the K-12 world. And so recently I was working on a project with an ASU team focused on education. And, they had kind of a seed or a shell of an idea that, considering my background, I was able to work with them and help shape it into something that would hopefully be very competitive with the foundation to whom we submitted it. And so, we work with the university to help develop strategies and the concepts. The next thing is that we assist teams with proposal framing, development, and submission, and then execute charitable grant agreements. And so there are 5 key things and these are framed from the perspective of the ways in which we can support you and your colleagues across the institution. So ways that we can help are helping teams articulate and frame their concept. And we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into each of these. So I'll just give you them up front. So help teams articulate and frame their concept, assess teams' readiness to solicit foundation support, identifying foundation prospects that have aligned interests, goals, and priorities, researching ASU relationships with funders and/or key personnel within the foundations, and develop engagement strategies. This is going to be really important, as we'll talk about in just a second. And then the last kind of key role that we can play for you and for your team is to help navigate the submission, award, and reporting processes. So jumping into each of these a bit more in depth. So one of the first things that we can do is help teams articulate and frame their concept. This is really important because, as we talked about a moment ago, it's all about the funder and what they care about. So there was a gentleman who led DARPA back in the 1970s, George Heilmeyer, and he developed these questions during his time with the federal government to really distill an idea down to its most important parts. You can see the questions that you go through and ask on the list right there. I literally have this list posted on my cork board right next to me, because really this is what matters, is distilling it down to its most basic idea so that we can better frame it, sell it, put it together for a foundation to see and understand and digest. Really getting down to what is it that you're actually trying to do? How is it different than the way things are done today? How is this different? How will it be successful? Why does this matter? What difference will it make? What are the risks? How much will it cost? How long will it take? And then what are the midterms to check for success along the way? And so, if you reach out to us for support, or reach out to your unit-based development officer for support, and they come to us, and really getting into this, how do we articulate and frame the concept? These are the questions that we're really going to be asking and guiding you through, because it helps the funder understand the concept as best as we can. Next is this idea that we can help assess teams' readiness to solicit foundation support. So what is fundable? Well, it's all about the fit. And we're going to see a video here in just a second, but really you have to know your funder. You have to read the website, review their grant making history, and know what their priorities, what their mission, what their vision, what their goals are. You have to remember, again, it's about the funder, not about us. There's this question that often comes up is does the funder accept unsolicited proposals? And in many cases, you'll go to a website and you'll be like, wow, this foundation has $2 billion in assets, and they have to give away, $250 million every single year. Wow, that could be something that we could go after. But then you see, wow, they don't accept unsolicited proposals. And so we'll talk about how to get around that roadblock, or how to potentially get around that roadblock in just a second. And then, what is fundable? It's all about the fit. So does your concept fall within the funder's stated priorities? So I have like a 1 minute video that we're going to show here. I think this should work. Let me see 1 second. Let's see, Suzanne, can you see this video? Just because I can see you on screen.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great.
For organizations approaching us for the first time, generally we encourage you to first visit our website, read our funding guidelines and approach. The next step would be a letter of inquiry, and all of those get a screen by program staff. And if there's something that looks like it would be a fit for us, we will reach out to have an initial conversation.
Organizations that are approaching us for the very first time should really make sure that what they're doing, the programs and the projects that they're involved with, match up pretty closely with the programs that we support that's listed on our website. So we have 3 very specific grant making areas, and their projects really align with those 3 areas.
I think grantees are most successful when they've done their homework in advance of a meeting. They know what the foundation is interested in funding. They've been to our website. They've looked at what our other grantees are doing. And then take the time in their first meeting to use it as an informational interview, to understand further what we're interested in, to understand what the state of our funding is, and frankly, what my needs as a program officer are in finding new opportunities to fund their work.
Great. And so one of the things I did, and I put this on the next slide, is, I went to just a couple of foundation websites this morning because if they have a website, it's often very, very clearly stated what their goals and mission and what they fund are on their website. And so this is from 5 different foundations of different sizes. So this one right here that says 2021 impact by the numbers, this is from the DeLuca Foundation, which I'll talk about more in just a second. And you can see, they fund in areas like youth development, arts education and outreach, workforce development, healthy communities, scholarships, medical research. Down here on the bottom left, this is a more than $2 billion foundation that does not accept unsolicited proposals, the Fidelity Foundation. And so they fund in 5 key areas: arts and culture, conservation, education, health, social and economic mobility. Here, this is a Walton Family Foundation, again, another very, very big national level foundation that funds in 3 main things: their home region of Bentonville, Arkansas, so the Northwest Kansas, Mississippi Delta area, K-12 education and environment. Down here on the bottom right, we have the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And so you can see that they fund in these different areas. And then the last is more of a local foundation, the Dorrance Family Foundation. And so, right, you read through their website a little bit and you can identify, their giving is related to the arts, children's health, animal welfare, animal therapy, sustainable agriculture, organizational effectiveness, capacity, natural resource conservation. And so really, it comes down to the funder, what their priorities and what their mission and vision and goals are. So the next thing is to identify foundation prospects with aligned interests, goals, and priorities. So here at the ASU Foundation, as Suzanne mentioned, we have central services that support the rest of the foundation, one of which is a prospect research function. Obviously, this is a human capacity issue. Sometimes they're at capacity and they don't have ability or time to take on things like right away. And so there might be a little bit of a delay there. And so they have to be very judicious about, which initiatives they are doing prospect research for. But this is also something that as frontline development officers, my colleague Jenny, myself, and others here at the ASU Foundation can do. Or we can support you in your own search for foundation prospects. And so you want to really look for foundations that fund in your area of interest and that fund the populations you serve and that you work with. You want to look for foundations that fund in your geographic region, provide the type of support you need. And so some might not give money for positions and for humans, because they, that's not a philanthropic giving is not a sustainable way to have a position oftentimes. And so there are some that will have certain restrictions on the types of support that they give. And there are a lot of different resources that we can point you in the direction of, including Foundation Directory Online, GuideStar, ProPublica, IRS Forms 990, which you'll see on the next slide here, press releases, media, and other places. And so I'll give you a recent example. So I was working with an ASU unit on identifying potential capacity and prospects with an organization called the DeLuca Foundation. They are a foundation started and supported by the founder of Subway. And so this is all publicly available information. On the left-hand side here, you can see their 990, and I think I got this one from ProPublica. You don't need a login or anything, but it tells us, this is from 2019, but that in 2019, they had just under $700 million in assets. You can see, to what, like where they have the breakdown of where that money goes. But if you scroll down further in that 990, you can start to see some of the grantees and the amount that they gave them. As nonprofits, they have to disclose this information publicly through their tax filings. And so you can see on here, for example, that in 2019, they gave $670,000 to Scholarship America. They gave, let's see a couple of other big ones on here, $500,000 to the Performing Arts Center, $100,000 to this particular place called Mercy Learning Center of Bridgeport. And you can also see a little bit of their purpose and contribution. So then I coupled that search with looking at their impact report. So this is from their website, just a screenshot of their impact report. And so Scholarship America. Okay, so that $670,000 that they gave over, that was indicated on their 990, we can now see, okay, grant funds provide $250, $2,500 scholarships to people who work at Subway in the US, Canada, and Australia. It also tells you, they tell you, for example, which region that funding is benefiting. And so through these available documents, we can sometimes paint a picture of our funders, what they care about, their geographic focus, the factors that they care about. And so you see on here, projected number served. For this particular foundation, this seems to be the impact metric that they publicly disclose and track and share, is the number of people who have benefited or been impacted by their grant making and their giving. And so all of this is publicly available information. And these are things that through our prospect research team, or through myself, my colleague Jenny, that we can help you with, is to identify good prospects. Or these are things that you can start to do a little bit of digging on your own. And sometimes, they don't have a website, or it's a little bit more opaque about, they don't produce an impact report every year. And so we have to do a little bit more digging in those cases to identify kind of some of their main areas and priorities. Next thing, one of the other ways that we can support, and this is important when you're thinking about how to engage with an institutional giver, in this case, a philanthropic foundation, is to understand the nature of ASU's relationships with either the foundation or key personnel within the foundation, and then starting to develop engagement strategies. And so, for example, I was talking a moment ago about the DeLuca Foundation, and they have given $1 million, when we were interested in them, we started looking them up. And they had given $1 million, but really it was to the ASU Foundation, but in support of the University Innovation Alliance, because they're a Florida-based foundation. There's an institution in Florida that's part of the University Innovation Alliance, and so they may or may not have any knowledge or awareness of ASU, but really they've supported the University Innovation Alliance, and so we have to be able to parse that information and know, like, okay, do they care about ASU, or do they care about the University Innovation Alliance and what they're trying to do? We can start to do some relationship mapping, see who has a connection with whom at the foundation, either through working together in the past, through previous giving, who's been a program officer, who's a program officer that's supported or led the support of initiatives here at ASU. And all these are really to figure out, like, what's the best way that we can get a good idea in front of a funder for whom we believe we have a good fit and good match. We can also then, when appropriate, make introductions for initial conversations, for informational interviews, for seeing if they're willing to receive a LOI and give feedback on the concept. And I mentioned a moment ago this idea of not accepting unsolicited proposals. And so many people will see that and say, well, they don't accept unsolicited proposals. Our prospects here are limited, no chance, move on to the next one, find a better candidate. And really what that means is there are some extra steps we need to take to see if we can get this get an idea in front of them. And so, maybe that means we need to just have an initial conversation. We need to find a mutual event that we're going to be at, or if there's an event that an ASU team is putting on that we can invite a program officer to. They can't, program officers and foundations can't solicit a proposal or can't solicit an idea from an institution like ASU unless they're familiar with the institution and the concept itself. And so, oftentimes if we can find an engagement opportunity or a reason or an excuse to invite a program officer to attend something, that at least builds awareness in their mind of some of the things happening here, hopefully to the point that, that through subsequent conversations and additional engagement opportunities that we could, they could solicit a proposal from us. And I put on here courting activities, right? Because for some foundations that do accept unsolicited proposals, they receive such a high volume of them that, it's difficult for yours to rise to the top and stand out. And so again, we think about what are these engagement opportunities? What are these courting activities that we can do? Maybe there's a conversation with the faculty lead of the center, or we can have a dean meet with them, but just really these ways that we can show like we're going to be a good partner for you and we're going to help you achieve your goals through a gift to ASU and the ASU Foundation. Okay, so next and the last thing is navigating the submission, award, and reporting processes. So we can support with proposal development. And we have, as Suzanne mentioned, we have a central service called Writing Services, and they can work with you from, idea conception to the actual, I have a tangible proposal in front of me, or that's work that Jenny and I and others here at the ASU Foundation can do. But we can really support you with proposal development and getting things together on a piece of paper or onto a slide deck that can be shared with the funder. Sometimes what that means is we can provide you with the needed ASU Foundation information, like our EIN number, our IRS letter of nonprofit status, or banking information, things of that sort. We can also submit proposals, track next steps on your behalf. We can also coordinate with ORSPA, RAS, or business ops as needed to make sure that funds are received, that the accounts are created, that money is moved into the right spot. We can also assist with the communication with program officers to make sure that they know what is happening, status reports, and also provide teams with reporting reminders. And so really what I want you to see is that either through your unit development officer or through the central team, myself, my colleagues here at the ASU Foundation, that we are here as a resource for you to help you navigate the philanthropic giving space. If there are a couple of ways that you can engage with us, right? Like you can first go to your foundation, your unit development officer and say, I would like to go after some foundation money, or I think this is a good candidate for foundations. And they might be able to handle it right then and there, or they might want to loop me in. Or conversely, you could come directly to me and or my colleague Jenny. And what we'll do is, one of the first questions we'll ask is, just is your unit development officer aware of this? Because we want to make sure that we're internally coordinated. But then we'll identify whether we're the right team or whether Writing Services is the right team to help, or whether this is something your unit development officer can handle. But you have a ton of resources available to you at your disposal to navigate this kind of complex process. So I know I've been talking for a long time. I'll need to have a drink of water here in a second. But next is we just have time for Q&A. And then our contact information is here. We'll give this deck to Faye so she can share it with all the attendees. So you'll have our contact information available, so you can reach out to us afterwards. And then let me just stop my screen share. And would love now to open it up to Q&A. Any questions that you have, things that we can answer, or ways that we can be helpful for you right now. So as I take a drink of water, you can either put them in the chat, take yourself off mute, whatever is helpful for you.
Yes, I think we've got one. Is it Echo?
Hey, thanks for that. It's really informative. If I have an investigator who already has an ongoing relationship with Gates Foundation and he's going to submit again, do I need to do anything in terms of notifying your office?
Where did that question come from? Sorry, I didn't see. Oh, so are you in Salesforce? Like, do you have access? Like, do you have access to Salesforce to be able to look at like who the development officer is or who the relationship monitor is?
I'm not sure. I'm pretty new.
Okay.
But I'll look into that.
So if the
maybe it would help if Echo explained who she is and how she's related to the sponsor and the proposal and the proposal. Like, give some context, Echo. I think that might be helpful for Andrew to contextualize where you are.
Oh, okay. I work in Souls as a pre-award person, basically preparing the proposals. And my PI, Cryan Pymans, he is a mosquito researcher and he's worked with Gates for many years. He's submitting to them again soon. So I just want to make sure that I go through the steps at ASU in terms of letting you guys know or getting approval.
Great, that is helpful, thank you. And so what I'd say is there are certain foundations for whom, there are there are categorizations of like, do not solicit without first contacting the RM. And Gates Foundation is one that's a foundation that we have obviously a deep institutional relationship with and want to make sure we're all coordinated and on the same page here. And so I think in cases like that, where if you're going to be going back to a foundation for continuing, I think just an email to either me, to Jacqueline, to your development officer, and just so we can make sure that we're, sometimes we're playing air traffic controller, we're saying, yep, good to go, clear for landing. And just know all the other kind of contextual factors that are going into it. So I'd say just an initial reach out to us to say the faculty wants to submit, just wanted to confirm this with you, and we'll get back to you and make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and I'd jump in there and say, your question was specific to Gates, but I think that that's really the starting place for most proposals or foundations or even corporations or individuals that, the majority of faculty members or others probably won't have access to the Salesforce system. That's our donor database, basically. And we are pretty judicious as to who has access to, obviously that there's a lot of very confidential information in the system. So it's not just an open door to access Salesforce. So I would say, anytime you or someone that you're working with or supporting is looking at a foundation, just the initial quick, conversation with either the foundation team, the corporate team, or your individual development officer would be important.
And the work instructions that I put in the chat are specific to research administrators. So faculty are always encouraged to work with their research administrators on whatever they're going to submit through ORSPA or elsewhere, right? Thank you, Barbara. So the coordination is always tough when we have so many people working on so many things all the time, right? Do our ASU Foundation folks want to speak to a little bit more about coordination and process?
So I'm reading that now. Faye knows my answer. It's going to be a good question. No, not really. I actually reached out to Faye to have some bigger conversations. Even just today, we've had a retirement in our office on the corporate side. And, it's definitely highlighted to me that we need to revisit this coordination. I do think, as I mentioned, some of those initial conversations are important. I know that in the past, again, I can speak to the corporate side. Our former AVP of corporate philanthropy, Sean Brenton, was always very closely aligned with ORSPA and could help make a determination. Does ORSPA need to be involved, not involved? and how do we internally need to have that relationship. So I am picking up those pieces right now to reconvene that coordination. Andrew, from your perspective, do you have, what's your working relationship there with ORSPA?
So like I mentioned, I'm still relatively new to this role. And so I've, the times that I've had to work with ORSPA, it's been they've reached out to us and have said, like, this is happening, what do we need to do? And so I'd say, we can identify the right people and we will figure it out on a case-by-case basis, and still learning in that particular instance as well.
Well, and I think that something you mentioned there, Andrew, just the case-by-case basis is also very important because, depending on, the award or the proposal that you're putting together, there are so many different factors that do indicate, who needs to be involved in what time and what space. And so I do think it's important that we all are coordinating from the front end and making sure we all have eyes on whatever it is that's going forward. Dave, would you have any other thoughts there? Obviously, I think you've probably been more involved in these conversations than either Andrew or I have.
No, I think just wait for everything to change and it'll change again. And then we'll get the process down and then it'll change again. So as we all know, we have to give space and grace for those that are, the system is ever moving. So we're trying to capture the river there. But I will say that the ASU Foundation is very capable and very, very thoughtful about the relationships. And in the same way that we ask our faculty to consider and develop a relationship with sponsored projects and federal agencies, this is the same wherever you go. Understanding the people you're working with and having that relationship so you can feel free to ask questions before you need them answered is kind of the space we need to be in a lot. Andrew, I'm sorry I interrupted you. What did you want to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say the other thing I would add is that, this is, I think, oftentimes like a back end thing that we'll figure out. So we can try to take this as much off of the ASU teams, the PIs, the researchers, the investigators, the project team, and coordinate and figure it out internally and on the back end. So that's not something that you're also chasing down. I think that's a function that we can do is make those determinations and do that, have those conversations so you can focus on your work and your impact.
Yeah, we can certainly give you your 6 minutes back in the day. So I want to give a great shout out to our presenters today, Suzanne and Andrew. Thank you very much for presenting and sharing your gifts with us. I also want to acknowledge the fact that you all took time out today to learn a little something about the ASU Foundation. We hope that you join us for PDW number 12, which I think is the last one, and it's working with DoD, also a very dynamic organization, and that will be presented by the Global Security Initiative. So I encourage you to check out our newsletter, funding.asu.edu, and come to our events. If you can't make them, still register. We'll send you the link. Okay, thank you all.